In today's episode of the Pathmark Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Rebel Brown, and she's hailing over as the VP of Strategy and Marketing at Quantum Computing. And today we're really going to be launching into a very different and interesting spin on marketing. We already actually briefly talked with Rebel prior. We were going to be looking into micro-focused ABM. For you guys who are getting their feet wet in ABM, that's going to be a very interesting episode. But first we obviously want to learn what quantum computing is all about. So Rebel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be here, Lucas.
Of course, yeah. So give us, a 360 overview. What is Quantum Computing Inc. all about?
Yeah, so we're Quantum Computing Inc. and we're a ready-to-run quantum software vendor that takes a different approach to quantum, Lucas. And right now in the market, a lot of the, quantum computing is the new big buzz, and it's a tremendous technology shift. But it's being focused on quantum scientists and on science, elite experts, et cetera. And we're taking the approach that this powerful technology should be available to everybody, not just to the quantum PhDs. So our software actually makes it simple for people and regular human beings and organizations to optimize things like their manufacturing supply chains, the delivery of goods, say, to consumers, oil and gas pipelines, emergency responses, et cetera, which, as you can tell, are all pretty relevant topics today, right?
Yeah. Very good. So maybe give us an insight, like who would be sort of the typical people, if it even exists, like the typical one, but like, the companies and the individuals within those companies that would benefit most.
Yeah, and so we focus on optimization, which is really about scheduling airplanes, right? How do you make sure all the airplanes and all the pilots and the stewardesses or flight attendants, et cetera, are all together, right? So for today in quantum, that's really larger organizations, all right? Because the computations, the simulations, they're really aimed toward a more global Fortune 1000 type company. Car manufacturers, oil and gas companies, banks, they're the ones that are exploring its quantum value right now, because quantum is going to be really appropriate for large problems, large solutions, and more complicated things, not necessarily it doesn't do what classical computers do, for example, running spreadsheets, having databases, et cetera. So it's those large organizations. And then it's also, we have a program called Qubit U that is designed to teach students in universities how to use our solutions and how to access quantum without having to go into the complexity and the cost of writing the programs. So, we've kind of got this leading edge large organizations, and then we've got the students who are coming up to be the next round of technologists. And so we're kind of focusing on both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, very, very cool. And what would you say within those organizations? What are the typical roles? Is that like sort of more like from the operational side of things?
Yeah, it tends to be the innovation teams, the operational research kinds of folks, the data scientists. In the automobile industry, we're working with some folks around autonomous vehicles and design for the sensors, and how do you place those sensors to be able to do the best possible autonomous vehicle in the most optimum safety as well as the lowest costs. In the banks, it can be the folks that are doing the analysis on portfolios. We also do we're working with banks in fraud detection, so it can be those fraud and security areas. So it really depends on what the use case is, but you're always dealing with the folks that are looking at complex data and complex kind of computations and analysis.
That makes sense. And so how do these folks hear about you guys, in their journey of getting to know Quantum Computing Inc.? Like, what are the channels that they walk through? In other words, what are the client acquisition channels that you as a sort of, marketer have an eye on?
Well, it's pretty, this is a different kind of market, as you and I were talking about, because this, unlike a lot of markets and marketers who are going out and casting their net to attract, volumes of people, I can literally tell you the 500 to 1,000 companies I want to target. And so therefore I know who they are, and we know who they are. And so it's about, how do I put the company in front of them strategically in a way that they are compelled to engage with us. So, and that means, as we were targeting earlier, a lot of micro targeting into these companies. It's digital, it's website, it's a lot of speaking, it's a lot of byline articles, it's a lot of, it's a blend of what we traditionally did from a sharing information and advice and becoming a trusted advisor, as well as just the awareness of having that imprint in front of them and social, et cetera. So they go, oh yeah, I've heard of that company, I want to talk to them.
Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. You mentioned the website there for a second. That's quite interesting. What role do you think the website plays in their journey at the moment?
Our website, in most cases, your website's selling. Our website educates. All right. And part of that's because I've been in technology for 30 years, working on bleeding edge technology companies as a consultant with venture capitalists and board of directors, et cetera. And quantum is the biggest shift I've seen in over 30 years. And it is so different from classical computing. It is night and day. There's nothing that's consistent. So our website is heavily, my blog every week is educational to C-levels, or I have a technologist write it for educational to more technology levels, to explain different aspects of quantum, what to expect, what's different, how you can use it, what you need to think about. This market also has a lot of hype in it, Lucas. I haven't ever seen this much hype. And that tends to be what happens with advanced technology. But it's also, a lot of the websites around what do you really need to think about? What is the reality that we see coming, and really bringing, what's real, what can be real, what can be value, what do you need to think about, and how do you need to prepare to the audience that comes to that site.
Gotcha. So you mentioned the website takes a very particular role, a very educational role, and I'm assuming also the journey of somebody getting to know about quantum and getting started is probably a little bit longer than in many other software products, right? Because they probably get into it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what's interesting to me about this is that, I don't think I have a number of, I'll give you an example. I've had a number of executive briefs that are really not about about us. They're about the market and what the topics in the market that are top of mind. Like, for example, I have one that's called classical versus quantum is the wrong question, because it's not a versus, it's an and, it's a blend. And those are the content pieces that are attracting like crazy engagement with these folks, because people, as in any new, highly new environment, people are looking for information that's baseline, not to be sold and hyped and promised things that they look at and go, yeah, how is that feasible? Right. And so that's the journey through the website. And really the whole idea is to just engage and share and become that advisor. And I have to tell you, I'm blessed because the CEO of this company is one of the most straight talkers I have ever worked with. And he is known as the most non-salesy CEO in the business, because he doesn't try to sell either. We all are about clarifying, sharing valuable information, sharing advice, and really helping people understand what the opportunities are and the best steps, not trying to push them into something that they may not be ready for, right?
You mentioned the role of understanding and education is key. Like, what have you learned in this specific environment? What is important for the website? Like, what is things that you need to do in order to drive, let's say, quote unquote, conversions from the website in that environment?
Yeah, well, I think what this gets into the micro target. I have never been a believer in just mass marketing going out and blanketing personas, et cetera. You really need to understand what the needs are of your audience. And it's very micro-targeted. What one company needs in an oil industry and where they are may be very different than what another big oil company is doing. And you need to be able to understand that and target your messaging, your advice, your specifics to those very narrow micro-targets as versus taking it up a level and making it generic. So that's what we've done. And that's what we continue to do. Obviously you do the umbrella work, right? You do this is the fundamentals that everybody needs to know. And then you start to drive into the pillars around, well, what is the difference about what an automobile manufacturer wants to look at versus what an oil and gas company. And then within oil and gas, there's different ways that they approach things and different philosophies or different problems. So then you've got to drive into that. But it all comes down to educating them in the education and advice, and then use cases. What people really want to know is, where should I start to look at quantum? What could it potentially do for me? Because they don't know. There's a lot of assumptions, but they don't know. And then it's, how do I get there? How do I start to explore? What are the steps? What do I need to think about? What do I need to not do? That's kind of the behavioral path that you go down, which is very unique for a marketing organization, right?
Yep, that makes a whole lot of sense. What I would like to do is switch gears a little bit, because we talked about what you guys are doing, who you're serving. We talked about sort of that very micro-targeted marketing approach. Now I'm curious to learn a little bit more about yourself as a marketer, because You've been, quite a while as even,
Yeah.
as an independent, a consultant to VCs around an advisor. What I'm curious about is now there's so much information out there, and probably in the quantum side, you guys are generating sort of the first bits and pieces of content. Where do you like to read? Now you took on the marketing role. Like, where do you go to keep on educating yourself with so much noise out there? What do you do?
I have I have 22 Google searches running that I scan every day. So I do, so I go out and read what comes in the media and in the analysts. But as with all of us, I have a healthy skepticism, right? Because we're only as good, the media and the analysts are only as good as the information they're fed, right? So, and then I go to places, I go to the technology journals. I go to like IEEE, and I'm learning how to read some of it. There's sometimes I have to look up every third word to figure out what they're talking about. But I do that. There are a number of amazing books that are coming out around quantum mechanics for quantum mechanics for dummies or simplified, quantum physics, quantum computing, quantum everything. So I have a library of quantum books that I go and I read, and some of them are really technical, so I can only read a little bit and then I need to take a break. Some of them, and so it's literally it's a wide range of sources. Lucas.
Makes sense. Since we're slowly approaching the end of the interview, I have some rapid fire questions for you to get to know you and your journey a bit better. Are you ready for those?
Here we go.
Quite fitting to what you just mentioned. What is the last book you read?
The Quantum Experience.
What is one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Our path to quantum consulting that literally gives people a methodology for stepping into quantum in a way that they can drive business results.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, what's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
I would make email, Zoom, and other personal tools work together better. Not the high end. I would make our personal productivity tools much more flexible and much more integrated, because it's a pain and we all know it, right?
I'm with you. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
Oh, worrying about a press release that I wasn't sure what to do when Putin was getting ready to attack Russia, Ukraine. Seriously, trying to balance that kept me up.
And if we do a little bit of time travel, and we go back to the days of the University of Evansville, if you allow, right?
Yeah.
So you're heading out of education into your journey in high tech. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey? Be
flexible. When I left U of E and then I went on to grad school, I wanted to be an advertiser on Madison Avenue in women's cosmetics. That was my goal, or a market researcher, right? I have a minor in market research. And I had an advisor in grad school say, why don't you go get into a tech market and then you can jump over into an ad agency and whatever, and look at where I am. I'm in the computer business. I had a heavy computer background, and I ended up doing what I love. And it wasn't what I expected to do at all. It was because I opened up and just let the opportunities flow. And I followed the opportunities as they came. I am not one of those 10-year career planners. I am where's the opportunity and where does my joy take me? And that's where I've ended up.
Nice. Rebel, I really appreciate you took the time with us today to share a bit on quantum computing with us. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed today about quantum computing Inc., what's the one thing that they should remember?
I think the one thing to remember is that quantum computing is coming. It is going to change our world, and our whole goal is to simplify it, de-risk it, and make it available to everybody so that we can all benefit from it.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Platform Presents.
Thank you, Lucas.